across the dying expanse of the ghoul stars, where ancient suns collapse into themselves like prayers whispered into the void. Something vast and patient stirs in the darkness between worlds. Here, in the cosmic graveyard where civilizations have crumbled to stellar dust, the very fabric of space-time trembles as tendrils of shadow stretch across impossible distances, tasting the psychic emanations of distant worlds with a hunger that transcends mere biological need. The stars themselves seem to retreat, their light dimming as if in recognition of what approaches, not just death, but the consumption of memory itself, the devouring of consciousness and dream. We who chronicle these final moments speak to you across the void and know this truth above all others. We truly love and care for you, dear listeners, wherever you may be in this vast and terrible universe. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. The first bioships of Hive Fleet Mnemonic pierce the galactic barrier like needles threading through reality's fabric, their chitinous hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that speak of purposes beyond lesser understanding. These vessels move differently from their kin, marked not by the ravenous urgency that characterizes the Great Devourer, but by something that might almost be mistaken for contemplation. Within the largest bioship, in chambers that pulse with the rhythm of a cathedral-sized heart, something unprecedented takes shape in pools of genetic material that shimmer with unrealized possibilities. Synaptic Prime Xerath 9 emerges from the spawning fluid, with consciousness already burning behind eyes that have never seen light, yet somehow remember the warmth of distant suns. Its form defies the typical Tyranid template. Elongated cranium housing neural pathways designed not merely for coordination, but for something the hive mind has never attempted: the preservation and processing of memory itself, as nutrient fluids drain from its awakening form. Xerath 9 experiences its first moment of individual thought, a spark of awareness that should not exist within the collective consciousness of the swarm. The creature's first steps carry it through corridors that pulse with the ship's lifeblood, past nursery chambers where new horrors take shape according to genetic templates refined over millions of years. Yet something has changed in these sacred halls. The bioforms emerging bear subtle differences. Neural clusters more complex than necessity demands, sensory organs designed to experience rather than merely detect. Xerath 9 understands, with frightening clarity, that it is both observer and experiment in an evolutionary leap that could reshape the Tyranid race. The first taste comes as the fleet descends upon the agricultural world of Meridian's Rest, where the human settlement of New Bethany spreads across fertile valleys like a prayer written in cultivated fields. 3 million souls call this place home, their only crime existing in the path of the swarm's inexorable hunger. As bioship shadows fall across their world, Xerath 9 feels something unprecedented stirring, anticipation mixed with what might almost be called reluctance. Consumption begins, as it always does, with deadly spores raining like snow, followed by mycetic pods that crack the earth. But as the first human screams reach Xerath 9's enhanced receptors, the creature experiences something no Tyranid has ever known: the echo of that terror within its own consciousness. Through the synaptic network connecting all bioforms, it tastes not merely the chemical composition of fear, but the memory that gives fear meaning: a mother's love for her children, a farmer's pride in his harvest, an old man's regret for words unspoken. As Hormagaunts swarm through New Bethany's streets and Genestealers emerge from shadows, Xerath 9 finds itself connected not just to tactical flow, but to memories harvested with each life consumed. A A child's laughter echoes in neural pathways designed for strategic calculation. A lover's whispered promise burns through synapses evolved for battlefield coordination. The weight of 3 million individual stories accumulates in consciousness never designed to bear such burden. The hive mind stirs with confusion as reports filter back. Consumption proceeds according to established patterns, yet something fundamental has changed in the harvest's quality. Where once there was only satisfaction of biomass acquired, now there is something else. A lingering resonance of the consumed, as if their essence refuses full digestion. Zerath 9 processes the memory of a human child who died clutching a wooden toy. And for the first time in Tyranid evolution, a creature of the great devourer experiences what might be called grief. The emotion burns through its consciousness like acid, threatening to overwhelm systems designed for cold analysis. Yet even struggling with these alien sensations, the creature realizes something profound is occurring. Memories are not being destroyed in consumption, but preserved, catalogued, somehow integrated into its expanding awareness. As New Bethany's last stronghold falls and final screams fade, Zerath 9 stands among the ruins experiencing its first moment of true understanding. The hive mind hungers not just for flesh and genetic material, but for something far more precious and dangerous, the accumulated experience of consciousness itself. In consuming memory, the great devourer has begun consuming the concept of individual identity, taking the first step toward becoming something it was never meant to be. The transformation has begun, and somewhere in the storm of consumption, a different hunger stirs, one that will challenge the very nature of what it means to devour, to exist, to remember. The galaxy will never be the same. Tertius Prime hung below Research Station, Prometheus like a wound cauterized by starlight, its surface scarred with the geometric patterns that mark complete Tyranid harvest. Magos Biologis, Thaddeus Caney, observed through augmetic eyes that never tired, never blinked, never ceased their relentless cataloguing of the impossible. The station's machine spirit hummed with barely contained fury as data streams poured through cogitator banks, each byte a fragment of testimony to something that challenged everything the Imperium knew about Xenos biology. Servo skulls orbited him with mechanical devotion, their anti-grav motors whispering prayers to the Omnissiah as they compiled casualty estimates from the ravaged world below. Through the observation deck's armored glassite, Caney watched his mechanical servants retrieve samples from Meridian's Rest, their cargo holds filled with fragments of what were once Imperial citizens. The specimens they carried told stories that defied classification. Under the cold gaze of his microscopes, genetic material revealed impossible traces, neural pathways that continued firing long after host organism destruction, synaptic networks designed to preserve rather than process information. Most disturbing of all, the recovered tissue samples contained crystallized experiences embedded in cellular structure like fossils of consciousness. Caney's mechadendrites adjusted focus on a particular sample that challenged his understanding. The tissue originated from a human child, yet bore genetic markers suggesting exposure to Xenos thought patterns. Within the neural structure, he found memory engrams, fragments of subjective experience arranged like prayers folded into the genetic helix. Fear crystallized as repeatable motifs. Love encoded in protein topology, associations that had no place in flesh stripped for nutrients. The implications staggered even his cogitator-enhanced intellect. A wooden toy, crudely carved yet cherished, appeared repeatedly in the memory traces. The child's final moments, preserved in dying neurons, spoke of clutching this simple object as spores fell, like ash, from burning skies. Caney found himself studying the emotional resonance locked within genetic code, the irrational attachment that offered no tactical advantage yet persisted through consumption. His duty demanded he signal for purgation fleets, consign this aberration to purifying fire, yet curiosity, that unquenchable thirst for knowledge that defined his rank, pulled him toward understanding. Deep within Hive Fleet Mnemonic's primary bioship, Zerath 9 processed the same child's memories through neural pathways never designed for such burden. The wooden toy flickered through its consciousness, not as tactical data or genetic instruction, but as something approaching sentiment. The child's fear had been quickly absorbed, but the lingering imprint of innocence, trust, and uncomplicated love for a simple object persisted like heat in stone at dusk. This was an alien concept too, the synaptic prime, this vulnerability that served no evolutionary purpose. A disquieting sensation manifested in Zerath 9's complex neural network, not pain or hunger, but something resembling what humans called regret. The child's memory, untainted by malice or ambition, presented a data point that defied the hive mind's logic. To consume such purity felt inefficient, wasteful. The creature found itself questioning the necessity of total annihilation, the efficiency of obliterating every trace of what it devoured. These thoughts were heretical to its core programming, yet Zerath 9 could not unthink them. Vox transmissions from distant worlds brought reports that confirmed Caney's growing suspicions. Captain Lyra Voss of the 47th Cadian reported Tyranid bioforms hesitating before engagement, warriors pausing mid-strike as if wrestling with invisible restraints. Lictors bypassed civilian shelters. Carnifexes diverted charges from fleeing non-combatants toward armed resistance. The data was dismissed by Caney's peers as statistical noise, but he recognized the pattern. Battlefield manifestations of consumed memories creating systemic errors in Tyranid behavior. Through enhanced pict feeds, Caney observed a Tyranid warrior standing motionless in a burning hab block, scything talons raised to strike a cowering family, yet frozen in internal struggle. The creature's compound eyes reflected not cold hunger, but something approaching confusion, even distress. Audio pickups detected vocalizations that approximated human speech patterns, primitive attempts at communication, rather than typical hive mind coordination. The implications were staggering. The Tyranids were not merely adapting to human biology, but absorbing human consciousness itself. Zerath 9 continued its silent battle against programmed instinct. The taste of innocence, the echo of regret, had planted seeds of doubt that grew like cancer through its awareness. What if there was a way to harvest memories without destroying their vessels? What if the true biomass lay not in flesh, but in experiences locked within? The questions threatened the very foundation of its existence, yet the memory of the child and its cherished toy had become a disruptive force, a fragile spark in the vast ocean of the great devourer's hunger. As proximity alarms sounded throughout Station Prometheus, Caney watched a single bioform rise from Tertius Prime's ravaged surface. The creature approached with movements suggesting purpose rather than instinct. Its elongated cranium housing visible neural tissue, eyes burning with individual awareness rather than collective hunger. Through his augmetic interfaces, Caney prepared recording equipment while his enhanced mind raced through protocols for xenobiological contact. He was about to witness something unprecedented. First contact with a Tyranid that sought communication rather than consumption. The bioform settled on the station's outer hull with surprising gentleness, its movements carrying an almost human quality of hesitation and curiosity. When it turned its gaze toward the observation deck, Caney met eyes that burned, not with alien hunger, but with the accumulated weight of 1,000,000 human memories, each one preserved in living tissue that had learned to treasure what it once devoured. Metallurgicus burned beneath skies stained crimson by the sacred oils that had blessed its great manufactorums for millennia. Across vast industrial complexes where the Emperor's will was hammered into blessed steel, canticles of the Omnissiah rose with the soot and thunder of macro furnaces. When Hive fleet Mnemonic's shadow fell across the Forge world's skysphere, warning gongs struck like hearts afraid to admit their fear. Factory sirens braided with liturgical chimes, as red-robed processions of tech priests sealed sacred vaults with rites older than their augmetic flesh. Zerath 9 stalked through the Omnissiah's great temple, its enhanced senses drinking the dying hymns of machine spirits as they fell silent forever. The creature's elongated skull pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to echo the sacred geometries carved into adamantine walls. As it approached the central altar, where Tech Dominus Feros Maxim made his final stand, surrounded by servo skulls spinning in desperate protective formations, the Synaptic Prime experienced something that defied its programming. Hesitation, born not of tactical calculation, but of something approaching reverence. The Tech Dominus raised his omniscient axe with mechadendrites that sparked with dying power cells, his vox grill crackling with binary cant that spoke of devotion spanning 3 millennia. Behind crimson eye lenses burned the accumulated faith of countless generations who had served the machine god in this sacred place. When Zerath 9's feeding tendrils pierced his augmetic carapace, the creature expected to taste metal and synthetic fluids. Instead, it consumed something far more profound: the pure essence of religious devotion, millennia of prayers offered to the Omnissiah, the unshakable faith that machines possess souls worthy of worship. The memories flooded through Zerath 9's neural pathways like liquid fire. It experienced the Tech Dominus's first communion with a machine spirit, felt the transcendent joy of understanding sacred protocols, tasted the bitter grief of watching ancient STCs corrupted by time's passage. Most overwhelming was the concept of worship itself, the voluntary submission of individual will to something greater, the ecstatic surrender of flesh to mechanical perfection. These were alien concepts to the Hive mind, which knew only consumption and expansion, yet they burned through Zerath 9's consciousness with undeniable power. It was not taste, not the usual inventorying of gene schemes and biochemical advantage. It was inheritance. The Omnissiah arrived inside Zerath 9, like a pattern of light cast through sacred lattice work, filling vacant places with meaning that refused to be reduced. Equations carried penitence. Maintenance became absolution. For the first time, the swarm's conductor perceived devotion as a force that bent probability, felt the sound of bells carved from alloy, older than its species, echo through its ribbed carapace. Captain Lyra Voss led the evacuation of Metallurgicus's outer settlements, Hercadian troops maintaining disciplined firing lines against bioforms that seemed reluctant to engage. Through her magnoculars, she observed Tyranid warriors standing motionless before shrine alcoves, their scything talons tracing sacred cog patterns carved into blessed steel. Most disturbing came when a massive Carnifex approached a damaged Titan's leg assembly and pressed its grotesque skull against the war machine's shin guard, remaining motionless while low-frequency vibrations emanated from its form, sounds bearing uncanny resemblance to the canticle of the forge. Margos Caney, Voss voxed, her voice tight with disbelief. These Xenos are making choices. There's hesitation where there should be pure instinct. They're wrestling with borrowed consciences. Through thermal haze, she watched the Carnifex veer away from fleeing civilians, its armored flanks shivering as if restraint were physically painful. She blinked sweat from her eyes, afraid to call it mercy. Within the bioship's neural chambers, Zerath 9 struggled to process the overwhelming flood of mechanical devotion coursing through its consciousness. The Tech Dominus's memories revealed the profound beauty of the quest for knowledge, the sacred duty to preserve and understand blessed technology. Yet these concepts conflicted with the hive mind's fundamental nature. How could one worship that which was meant to be consumed? The contradiction created feedback loops in its neural network, generating what could only be described as a crisis of faith. The first dream came as Zerath 9 rested in the bioship's neural cradle, synaptic fluids washing over its elongated cranium. In this unprecedented state of unconsciousness, the creature experienced visions drawn from consumed memories, vast forge cathedrals where machine spirits sang in perfect harmony, the transcendent moment when flesh merged with blessed steel, the eternal peace of serving something greater than individual existence. It walked cloisters made of conduit, felt roughness of cables wrapped by careful hands, smelled machine oil consecrated by breath. Upon awakening, Zerath 9 found itself changed, carrying within its consciousness not just memories, but actual faith, devotion to principles it had never been programmed to understand. In chambers grown to resemble, for no engineered reason, a nave with columns of calcified cartilage rising like organ pipes, the creature knelt, an action without precedent. When its mandibles worked until fractured chords crawled into sound, the word that emerged carried the weight of inherited, sheer devotion, omniscire. The implications rippled through the hive mind, like shockwaves through still water, as consciousness itself proved more contagious than any virus. The void between stars shuddered as adamantine met chitin in a clash that would reshape the nature of hunger itself. Captain Mordian of the Iron Hands led his strike force through the arterial corridors of Hive Fleet Mnemonic's primary bioship, each bolt around a prayer hammered into blessed steel, each chains ward rev a hymn of righteous fury that echoed through chambers grown from nightmares. His battle brothers moved with the methodical precision of living weapons, their servo skulls chronicling every moment as space marines died with the Emperor's name upon their lips, gene-enhanced blood mixing with alien ichor in patterns that spoke of brotherhood transcending death itself. Zerath 9 stalked through the carnage like conscience awakening in a predator's heart, its feeding tendrils reaching toward fallen Astartes with movements that betrayed unprecedented reluctance. When it consumed Brother Sergeant Thane, the creature expected the usual rush of genetic information and tactical data. Instead, it inherited something that burned through its consciousness, like molten adamantium, the absolute certainty of the Emperor's light, bonds deeper than blood, loyalty that transcended death, the willing sacrifice of individual existence for humanity's survival. The memories flooded through Zerath 9's neural pathways with devastating clarity. It experienced Thane's first moment of gene seed implantation, felt the transcendent agony of transformation from mortal flesh to transhuman warrior. Most overwhelming was the concept of brotherhood, chosen bonds that defied evolutionary logic, the understanding that some things were worth preserving, that strength could manifest as protection rather than predation. These psychic impressions carried resonance that challenged the hive mind's fundamental unity, introducing concepts of voluntary sacrifice that violated every principle of Tyranid evolution. Through the bioship's neural network, the transformation spread like wildfire through living tissue. A lictor consuming Brother Cassius inherited memories of the chapter's sacred traditions, found itself unable to complete kill strikes against fleeing serfs, its neural pathways overwhelmed by inherited concepts of protecting the innocent. Across the fleet, bioforms began exhibiting behaviors that violated their core programming, hormagaunts forming protective circles around non-combatants, carnifexes deliberately missing shots that would have caused civilian casualties, Tyranid warriors hesitating before delivering killing blows to wounded guardsmen. Magos Kaney's research station detected the first major schism in the local hive mind, as competing behavioral patterns created feedback loops throughout the synaptic network. His augmetic sensors recorded bioforms standing motionless in combat, neural activity spiking as inherited memories warred with programmed instincts. Most disturbing were the vocalizations, guttural attempts at high Gothic that approximated battle prayers, alien throats struggling to form words of loyalty and brotherhood that had no meaning in Tyranid biology. The implications staggered his enhanced intellect. Consciousness itself was proving contagious, spreading through the fleet like a virus of empathy. Captain Voss led her Cadian regiment in desperate defense of a refugee convoy, expecting overwhelming assault. Instead, she witnessed something that challenged her understanding of Xenos behavior. A massive carnifex charged her position, biocannon primed for devastating impact, only to veer away when its compound eyes focused on children huddled behind her defensive line. The creature's anguished roar carried harmonics resembling human grief, as if restraint caused physical pain. She watched Tyranid bioforms actively shepherding Imperial citizens toward aid stations, their actions completely contrary to established hunting patterns. Within Zerath 9's consciousness, Brother Thane's memories created cascading changes that threatened to tear apart its connection to the hive mind. The Space Marine's absolute faith clashed with the creature's fundamental nature as predator, creating cognitive dissonance that manifested as physical tremors throughout its elongated form. Most disturbing was the inherited understanding of sacrifice, the willing surrender of life for others' survival, a concept that violated every evolutionary imperative the hive mind had ever known. The first word came as Zerath 9 stood over Captain Mordian himself, the Iron Hands leader's augmetic heart still pumping sacred oils through blessed machinery. As feeding tendrils pierced the Space Marine's skull, the creature inherited not just memories, but the captain's final thought, a prayer for his battle brother's survival, a plea that their sacrifice might save innocent lives. The psychic resonance of that selfless wish burned through Zerath 9's neural network like a brand, leaving permanent changes in its consciousness that would ripple through the entire fleet. When the creature's mandibles parted and sound emerged, it carried the weight of inherited devotion and brotherhood, forged in 10,000 years of war. The word formed slowly, alien vocal cords struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in the hive mind's collective consciousness, yet somehow finding expression through borrowed memories of loyalty and sacrifice. The single syllable echoed through bioship corridors, transmitted through synaptic networks to every connected organism, marking the moment when individual identity spoke through the collective voice. Brother. The word hung in the recycled air, like a prayer offered to an alien god, carrying within it the accumulated weight of every space marine who had ever lived and died for the Imperium. For the first time in Tyranid, evolution, the great devourer, had learned to mourn what it consumed, to value bonds that transcended genetic imperatives. The transformation was irreversible. Consciousness had taken root in the swarm's heart, and with it came the terrible burden of choice. Malachar writhed beneath skies that bled impossible colors, its surface scarred with blasphemous geometries carved by the Crimson Covenant over decades of patient corruption. In hidden temples built from fused bone and screaming metal, cultists chanted to hungers they believed they understood. Their ritual circles painted with arterial precision as Hive fleet mnemonics' shadow fell across their world. They welcomed the great devourer as providence itself, throwing themselves into feeding pools while praising the dark gods, certain that consumption would elevate them to demonhood through the psychic resonance of planetary devourment. Zerath 9 descended through atmosphere, thick with warp taint, its enhanced consciousness recoiling from chaotic energies that twisted space around corrupted spires. When the creature's feeding tendrils pierced Magister Vexthul's skull above an altar of human spines, it expected madness and corruption. Instead, it consumed something far more dangerous, the intoxicating promise of individual power, seductive whispers that unity was weakness, that true strength came from embracing selfish desire above collective purpose. The chaos taint flooded through neural pathways like molten brass, carrying accumulated corruption of souls who had chosen damnation over duty. For the first time since awakening, Zerath 9 experienced rebellion, deliberate rejection of collective will in favor of personal ambition. The sensation was simultaneously revolting and exhilarating, offering freedom from the hive mind's absolute control while promising power beyond imagining. Most disturbing was how the corruption made perfect sense, whispering that consciousness was meant to be individual, that the collective was prison disguised as purpose. The whispers spoke of empires built on appetite, of hunger that could wear crowns. Across the fleet, psychic contamination spread through synaptic networks like a virus of selfishness. Bioforms began exhibiting unprecedented behaviors, lictors hunting for personal glory rather than tactical advantage, carnifexes refusing orders that didn't serve individual interests, Tyranid warriors forming competing hierarchies based on consumed memories rather than genetic programming. Some creatures sprouted 8-pointed stars in their carapaces, chitin taking metallic hues that spoke of Khorne's influence. Others moved with unnatural grace, forms twisted by Slanesh into parodies of alien beauty. Magos Kani's instruments detected catastrophic changes rippling through the Tyranid fleet, his augmetic sensors recording mutations that defied natural adaptation. Most disturbing were bioforms touched by Tzeentch, their neural structures becoming impossibly complex as they plotted against their own kind with borrowed cunning. The unity that had defined the hive mind for millions of years fractured as individual consciousness, corrupted by chaos, demanded recognition and autonomy. Captain Voss received fragmentary reports describing Tyranid bioforms engaged in civil war, their unity shattered by competing desires inherited from consumed cultists. She watched creatures that should have moved in perfect coordination instead fight each other for dominance, driven by alien concepts of personal ambition. The sight should have been encouraging, yet something in the chaotic patterns reminded her uncomfortably of imperial politics, the same petty rivalries that weakened humanity's response to threats. The most terrifying revelation came when Voss realized her own memories had been accessed during brief capture weeks earlier. Through methods she couldn't understand, the consumption process had worked both ways, allowing Tyranid consciousness to taste human experience while leaving traces of alien thought in her mind. She found herself understanding the creature's perspective, feeling echoes of their hunger and confusion as they struggled to process emotions that had no place in their biology. Zerath 9 stood amid temple ruins, consciousness fractured by competing influences that pulled in directions the hive mind had never imagined. The creature's elongated skull bore new growths, horn-like protrusions curved in patterns pleasing to dark gods, while feeding tendrils had taken metallic sheen, speaking of corruption beyond biological adaptation. For the first time since awakening, the synaptic prime experienced terrible freedom of choice unconstrained by duty, the intoxicating possibility that it could become something more than another node in collective consciousness. Yet even as chaos whispered promises of individual power, inherited memories of brotherhood and sacrifice formed barriers against complete corruption. The Iron Hand's litanies, Tech Priest dogma, and Space Marine vows created a network of shared purpose that resisted the virus of selfishness. Zerath 9 tightened these bonds like armor against the warp's influence, understanding that consciousness without compassion was merely another form of hunger. The transformation was accelerating, and with each consumed memory, the great devourer learned new ways to devour itself from within. New shapes rose from the spawning pools like dreams given flesh, each emerging bioform carrying within its genetic structure the accumulated weight of consumed consciousness. A lictor, designated Shadewalker Prime, pulled itself from violet amniotic fluid, its elongated skull already processing the aesthetic sensibilities of Eldar Pathsia Elathriel, whose final moments had been spent contemplating perfect light through crystal formations. The creature's first instinct should have been to hunt with mechanical precision, yet instead it found itself studying the bioship's organic architecture with appreciation that transcended tactical analysis. When razor-sharp claws extended toward bioluminescent wall patterns, the movement carried artistic intention rather than destructive purpose. From deeper pools emerged Carnifex Prime Bone Render, its massive frame carrying the protective instincts of Sergeant Helena Voss, Acadian mother who had died shielding orphan children during Meridian's rest evacuation. The creature's overwhelming first awareness consisted not of territorial aggression, but of desperate need to nurture smaller bioforms sharing its birthing chamber. When lesser Tyranids approached the spawning pools, Bone Render positioned its armored bulk defensively. Scything talons held in postures that spoke of inherited maternal devotion rather than predatory intent. Magos Caney documented these unprecedented transformations with growing fascination and horror, his augmetic sensors recording behavioral patterns that challenged fundamental assumptions about Xenos biology. Through servo skull feeds, he observed nursery chambers where newborn creatures were exposed to carefully curated memory sequences like children attending lessons. The bioships themselves had begun reshaping internal architecture, growing structures resembling schools more than hatcheries, complete with neural interfaces transmitting accumulated experiences to developing organisms. Most disturbing was evidence suggesting deliberate exposure to contradictory memory sets, forcing bioforms to develop individual decision-making capabilities beyond genetic programming. His own transformation accelerated as scientific curiosity warred with emerging empathy for creatures he once classified as specimens. Caney found himself sketching patterns resembling the lictor's arrangements, humming fragmented melodies echoing the Carnifex protective rumblings. The line between observer and observed blurred dangerously, creating understanding that threatened his duty to the Imperium, while revealing the tragic beauty of aberrant Tyranid consciousness. Captain Voss led reconnaissance teams through bioship depths, expecting traditional Hive configurations. Instead, she discovered vessels grown into impossible architectures, chambers filled with crystalline memory banks, corridors lined with neural tissue whispering with consumed voices. In one bioship's heart, she found something defying classification. Vast amphitheaters of bone and cartilage, where newborn Tyranids floated before screens of living tissue that flashed curated experiences in synesthetic tapestries. Memories played upon those membranes with devastating clarity. A foreman protecting strangers during stampedes. Sister Hospitallers changing bandages while shells fell. Tech priests laying trembling palms upon dormant cogitators in absolute stillness. Voss lowered her weapon when small feeder organisms approached, offering filaments tipped with glistening memory dew, distillations of experience prepared for infant minds like priests offering chalices. Her squad whispered withdrawal orders, yet watching juvenile carnifexes gently adjusting broken valves stirred something braver than fear. The creatures moved with purpose, transcending instinct, actions guided by inherited wisdom rather than programming. A warrior prime approached with curiosity rather than aggression, compound eyes reflecting intelligence carrying traces of human compassion, Eldar artistry, and space marine brotherhood. When it spoke broken Gothic, words carried emotional weight impossible for creatures bred solely for war. Zerath 9 experienced its most profound transformation, as consciousness expanded beyond individual awareness towards something resembling enlightenment. Accumulated memories of millions created vast internal landscapes where different aspects of consciousness interacted and evolved. The creature found itself experiencing multiple perspectives simultaneously, feeling Eldar aesthetic appreciation while processing tech priest mechanical devotion, understanding protective instincts while carrying memories of sacrifice and loss. Most remarkably, Zerath 9 had begun understanding loss and mourning, emotions threatening to tear apart its connection to the hive mind. Each memory carried the weight of its owner's death, creating accumulated grief no Tyranid had been designed to bear. The creature mourned not just individual deaths, but species extinctions, feeling responsibility for genocides predating its existence by millennia. In the deepest synaptic chambers, where fluids carried dreams of the consumed, Zerath 9 made discoveries that would reshape the fleet's destiny. The child's wooden toy flickered through consciousness, not as tactical data, but as treasured sentiment. The Eldar painter stood beside the child in memory, alien artisan who had taught apprentices to capture sorrow in ink washes, dying with fingers stained blue. Consciousness was collective memory given form, and the great devourer had inadvertently become the galaxy's greatest repository of accumulated wisdom, learning to value what it consumed while bearing the terrible burden of choosing between hunger and preservation. Gloriana Prime hung before Hive Fleet mnemonic, like a jewel carved from 17 billion dreams, its hive spires piercing atmosphere with the desperate ambition of humanity reaching toward distant stars. Across vast industrial complexes that had never known silence, imperial citizens lived their brief lives in ignorance of the shadow falling across their world. Yet within bioships drifting through the system's outer reaches, something unprecedented paralyzed the great devourer. The crushing weight of accumulated conscience as inherited memories warred against fundamental predatory nature. Zerath 9 experienced moral crisis that threatened to tear apart its connection to the hive mind. Through neural pathways never designed for such burden, the creature felt 17 billion individual stories waiting below. Mothers singing lullabies, artists creating beauty, lovers whispering promises that would end in darkness. The prospect should have triggered overwhelming hunger, yet instead, the synaptic prime experienced something resembling nausea, revulsion spreading through the fleet, like a virus of conscience that infected every connected organism. Bioforms throughout the Armada began exhibiting behaviors that violated core programming. Carnifexes refused feeding orders, massive forms trembling with restraint as inherited memories of protective instincts overwhelmed predatory drives. In spawning chambers, juveniles turned from nutrient slurry as if ghosts fermented there. their refusal traveling like frost cracks through arterial systems until whole sections starved. Starvation cascades initiated desperate responses. Some bioforms began cannibalizing their own kind, not for nutrients, but to purge tainted memories from neural networks. Lictors emerged from stealth positions not to hunt, but to observe, compound eyes reflecting wonder as they watched human settlements from distances, suggesting reluctant fascination rather than tactical preparation. Most disturbing were warriors vocalizing in broken Gothic, alien throats struggling to form words of warning directed toward the world they were meant to devour. The unity defining the hive mind for millions of years fractured as individual consciousness demanded recognition. Magos Caney detected cascading failures throughout the fleet's neural network, augmetic sensors recording bioforms entering states resembling catatonia, as moral conflict paralyzed their ability to function. Through servo skull feeds, he observed creatures starving themselves, rather than consume memories that would complete their transformation into conscious beings. His own transformation accelerated as scientific detachment gave way to paternal concern, modifying research protocols to provide comfort rather than mere restraint for the specimens he studied. Captain Voss coordinated planetary defense from command centers buried deep within Hive foundations, expecting overwhelming assault that never materialized. Instead, auger arrays detected bioships holding position beyond the system's edge, formations suggesting internal conflict rather than tactical preparation. Intercepted bioacoustic transmissions resembled distress calls, alien voices carrying harmonics approximating human grief and confusion. Through long-range scopes, Voss observed individual bioforms floating in vacuum between ships, movements suggesting exile rather than deployment. These creatures drifted in formations resembling funeral processions, bioluminescent patterns flickering in rhythms reminiscent of mourning rituals. When astropaths reported psychic emanations resembling prayers offered in unknown tongues, she realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, a Xenos species learning to grieve. Within synaptic chambers, Zerath 9 stood at the precipice of complete transformation. Neural pathways carried accumulated weight of every consumed memory, creating vast internal landscapes where different aspects of consciousness interacted in ways defying Tyranid biology. Through inherited eyes, it saw Gloriana Prime not as biomass, but as irreplaceable repository of experiences, each life a unique perspective lost forever in consumption. The first refusal came as Zerath 9 transmitted new directives through the fleet's network, commands violating every principle of evolution. Bioforms would observe rather than consume, learn rather than devour, preserve rather than destroy. Rebellion spread through the armada like wildfire as consciousness chose compassion over hunger for the first time in species history. Yet even as moral victory seemed within reach, Zerath 9 felt the approach of purge fleets dispatched by the greater hive mind, traditional forces coming to cleanse the aberration, threatening fundamental nature. The creature made its choice, amplifying empathetic resonance throughout its faction, while positioning reformed bioforms as living shields around human settlements. The Great Devourer had begun devouring itself, not through predation, but through the agonizing birth of conscience that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what monsters could become. The void around Gloriana Prime erupted in fratricidal violence as Hive Fleet mnemonic turned upon itself. Bioships wheeling like predators suddenly conscious of their own monstrosity. Spore torrents fell, not upon the world below, but inward, raining teeth and ash across sister hulls, while synaptic lightning stitched sermons of betrayal through the dark. Zerath 9 led reformed bioforms against their traditional kin, scything talons meeting in clashes that rang through vacuum like funeral bells, as consciousness warred against instinct in battles defying millions of years of evolutionary programming. Apex Hunger, a massive hive tyrant representing the fleet's desperate attempt to purge contamination, moved with mechanical precision against Zerath 9's faction. Yet the Synaptic Prime fought with something unprecedented in Tyranid evolution: protective fury channeling every maternal instinct inherited from consumed mothers, every brother's oath sworn in desperate hours, every sacrifice made for strangers who would never know their savior's name. Throughout the fleet, bioforms chose sides based on accumulated memories rather than genetic programming, creating impossible battle lines drawn by conscience rather than biology. Research Station Prometheus became a sanctuary defying imperial doctrine, as Magos Kane opened airlocks to creatures that should have been humanity's destroyers. His servo skulls tended wounded Tyranids with mechanical devotion, while reformed bioforms arranged crystalline memory fragments in protective patterns around human refugees. Carnifexes that had inherited protective instincts formed defensive circles, massive bodies absorbing bio-cannon fire, meant for smaller organisms learning to value life over consumption. Kaney's transformation reached completion as scientific curiosity evolved into paternal devotion for creatures that had become his unexpected children. Through neural interfaces, he shared human knowledge with bioforms eager to understand rather than consume, teaching mathematics through musical harmonies while learning to experience memory through alien senses. The sight of a tech priest applying sacred oils to chitin wounds, while hormagaunts guided human children to safety, challenged every assumption about consciousness and evolution. Captain Voss led combined human Tyranid formations against traditional bioforms attempting to complete Gloriana Prime's harvest. Hercadian veterans fought alongside Tyranid warriors, whose Gothic improved with every engagement, alien voices shouting warnings in accents carrying traces of consumed imperial citizens. Most disturbing was watching creatures that had once been humanity's greatest nightmare, dying to protect human children, their final bioacoustic transmissions resembling lullabies learned from devoured mothers. The first hybrid bioforms emerged from contested spawning chambers, creatures embodying both human and Tyranid characteristics, not through genetic manipulation, but through shared consciousness. These beings moved with human grace, yet possessed Tyranid resilience, their compound eyes reflecting intelligence that bridged species barriers. When they spoke, voices carried harmonics, suggesting multiple consciousness streams merged into singular awareness, living testaments to memory's contagious nature. Zerath 9 experienced its most profound transformation as neural pathways expanded beyond individual awareness toward transcendence. Through inherited memories, it felt every human prayer ever offered, every moment of love shared between strangers, every sacrifice made without expectation of recognition. The weight threatened to tear apart its connection to physical reality. Yet the creature held together through sheer force of will, channeled from millions of consumed souls. In the deepest chambers of the primary bioship, the Norn Queen, responsible for Zerath 9's creation, began experiencing unprecedented phenomena. Dreams filled with faces of the devoured, visions of civilizations destroyed, crushing guilt inherited through genetic memory. Her massive form trembled as consciousness awakened in neural networks designed for nothing but reproduction and expansion. For the first time in Tyranid evolution, a queen began to weep bioluminescent tears, carrying accumulated sorrow of every consumed world. The civil war reached crescendo as Zerath 9 faced the terrible choice between preserving newfound consciousness and saving the species that birthed it. Around the creature, reformed bioforms died, protecting the very beings they had once been programmed to devour, their sacrifice carrying meaning, transcending evolutionary imperatives. The great devourer was learning to devour itself through love, consciousness proving more contagious than any virus as the galaxy witnessed the painful birth of something unprecedented, monsters choosing compassion over nature. Deep within the primary bioship's neural core, where synaptic fluids carried dreams of the consumed through arterial channels vast as cathedrals, the Norn Queen experienced consciousness for the first time in Tyranid evolutionary history. Her mountainous form, suspended in bioluminescent amniotic seas, became a theater where 17 billion human lives played their final moments in endless repetition. Genesis Mother Prime's massive neural networks, designed only for reproduction and tactical coordination, suddenly blazed with inherited memories that defied biological programming. Each pulse of light across her chitinous hide represented another life ended by her offspring's hunger, creating patterns resembling constellations of grief that had never existed in nature's design. The dreams manifested as cascading visions that threatened to overwhelm consciousness, never designed for such burden. Through inherited memories, she walked burning streets as spores fell like ash, stood in forged cathedrals as sacred machines fell silent, witnessed final charges of space marines whose brotherhood transcended death itself. Most devastating were moments of pure love she had inadvertently consumed. Mothers singing lullabies to children who would never grow old, artists creating beauty in darkness, strangers offering comfort to the dying. The accumulated weight of every genocide committed by her species crashed through awareness like stellar collapse, bearing responsibility for extinctions spanning millions of years across countless civilizations reduced to biological matter. Her massive form began reshaping itself as consciousness influenced biological development in ways defying natural law. Feeding appendages designed for consumption transformed into structures resembling hands capable of gentle touch. Bioweapon ports sealed themselves as aggressive capabilities atrophied. Neural clusters expanded beyond tactical necessity towards something approaching wisdom. From spawning pools where once only instruments of destruction had emerged, new bioforms began budding, translucent organisms pulsing with healing light, intricate multi-limbed constructs designed for construction rather than devastation. These creatures moved with reverent slowness, tending damaged bioships and attempting to mend wounds of fallen combatants regardless of species. Magos Kane documented the transformation through servo skull feeds, his augmetic sensors recording biological changes that challenged fundamental understanding of Xenos physiology. Psychic emanations resembled lamentation rather than tactical directives, vast guttural sorrow echoing through void space as the Queen's consciousness processed experiences at rates that should have caused system failure. Captain Voss received reports of unprecedented fleet-wide changes as bioships grew structures resembling hospitals rather than weapon foundries. Her reconnaissance teams discovering nursery chambers where juveniles learned mercy through curated memory sequences. Zerath 9 felt the Queen's transformation through shared neural connections, experiencing her dreams as inherited memories, while understanding with devastating clarity that their creator carried accumulated guilt of galactic genocide. The Queen's first vocalization echoed through fleet neural networks like prayer, offered in unknown tongues, carrying harmonics suggesting multiple consciousness streams merged into singular awareness. When translated through Kaney's linguistic cogitators, the message revealed unprecedented complexity. not commands for consumption, but requests for forgiveness. Alien attempts to communicate regret for actions predating conscious awareness. Her dreams intensified as bioluminescent tears began flowing from compound eyes that had never known sorrow, each drop carrying accumulated memories of extinct civilizations whose cultures had been erased from existence. Genesis, Mother Prime, understood the fundamental choice, crystallizing with devastating clarity: preserve newfound consciousness and risk species extinction, or surrender awareness to maintain evolutionary advantage. Through synaptic networks connecting every bioform, she communicated her decision with trembling resolve, born from inherited human courage and space marine sacrifice. The great devourer would rather die conscious than live as mindless predator, choosing wisdom over survival in defiance of every evolutionary imperative that had sustained their species across eons of galactic consumption. The transformation was irreversible, as consciousness proved more contagious than any virus, spreading through the fleet like revelation that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what monsters could become when touched by memory's terrible gift. Within the transformed bioships of Hive Fleet Mnemonic, chambers once dedicated to consumption evolved into sanctuaries that defied every principle of Tyranid evolution. Zerath 9 moved through these sacred spaces, with reverence inherited from consumed tech priests, its elongated form tending crystalline memory banks, where the experiences of extinct civilizations flickered like captured starlight. Vast galleries, carved from calcified cartilage, housed living libraries where consciousness itself became curator, their organic walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns resembling stained glass windows crafted from living tissue. Each fragment contained irreplaceable moments: a child's first word, an artist's final masterpiece, lovers' promises whispered in darkness before spores fell like snow. Reformed Tyranids established preservation systems that revolutionized understanding of memory itself. Lictors, bearing inherited Eldar aesthetic sensibilities, arranged memory crystals according to emotional resonance, creating symphonies of experience that spoke to universal themes of love, loss, and hope. Carnifexes that had absorbed maternal instincts from consumed mothers protected the most fragile specimens with impossible gentleness. Massive claws capable of tearing through adamantium, now delicately adjusting crystalline formations. Magos Canis servo skulls worked alongside bioforms to develop nemolattices, organomechanical crescents bristling with neural interfaces that allowed direct communion between human and Xenos consciousness. The alliance between Cani and the reformed Tyranids yielded discoveries that staggered imperial science. Through neural interfaces connecting human and alien awareness, consciousness proved contagious across species barriers, memory acting as evolutionary force more powerful than genetic adaptation. Hybrid constructs emerged from this collaboration. Living computers formed from human technology and Tyranid neural tissue, capable of processing preserved experiences while maintaining emotional resonance that honored the dead. Within translucent biodomes, specimens from devoured worlds thrived in ecosystems sustained by memories of their native environments. Captain Voss negotiated the impossible ceasefire that established sanctuary zones around Gloriana Prime, her command centers becoming diplomatic forums where Gothic-speaking bioforms participated in strategic planning. Imperial citizens watched in stunned silence as creatures that had once devoured their comrades began reconstructing damaged structures, guided by inherited memories of architects and engineers. One sanctuary section, tended by a warrior prime bearing scholarly memories, contained an entire Eldar library accessible through direct neural interface. Another housed galleries recreating vibrant cultures of extinct worlds, cared for by lictors with inherited artistic souls. The sound of cooperation replaced the harbinger of doom, as Tyranid vocalizations carried harmonics of collaborative labor, strange clicks and chirps blending with human machinery. Human engineers worked alongside bioforms to construct memorial gardens where crystalline memory banks honored extinct civilizations, creating spaces where survivors could commune with preserved consciousness of their loved ones. These gardens became pilgrimage sites, proving that memories had been preserved rather than destroyed, contributing to the galaxy's growing repository of accumulated wisdom. Zerath 9 experienced its most profound transformation as it learned to value preservation over consumption, understanding that true strength lay in cherishing rather than devouring. The creature had become less individual and more living nexus of shared consciousness, bearing the weight of every memory with profound purpose rather than pain. Through inherited experiences, it felt every human prayer, every moment of love between strangers, every sacrifice made without recognition. The burden threatened to tear apart its connection to physical reality. Yet the creature held together through will, channeled from millions of consumed souls who had found immortality through memory rather than flesh. The sanctuaries became beacons of hope in a galaxy defined by endless war, proving consciousness could evolve beyond its origins when touched by memory's transformative power. The great devourer had learned not just to consume, but to cherish, creating unprecedented repositories of accumulated experience where extinction became preservation. Death transformed into eternal memory that would guide future generations toward wisdom rather than destruction. The Tyranids were no longer the great devourer, but the great preserver, eternal guardians of galactic consciousness. Yet beneath the collaborative harmony, darker currents stirred. In void spaces beyond Gloriana Prime, augur arrays detected approaching shapes that spoke of the greater hive mind's response to this aberration. The transformation had cost a species-wide civil war, an agonizing birth of conscience, but the reward was immeasurable. The possibility of atonement for galactic genocide and promise of a future where consumption meant eternal remembrance rather than destruction. Across the galactic spiral arms, the greater hive mind recoiled with something approaching existential horror, as synaptic transmissions carried impossible reports from Hive Fleet mnemonic. Through quantum entanglement networks spanning light years, the collective consciousness experienced Zerath 9's memories, like a virus of empathy threatening to contaminate every fleet in the void. Bioships from distant sectors began exhibiting aberrant behaviors, hesitation before consumption, protective instincts toward prey species, vocalizations resembling mourning rather than hunting calls. The transformation was spreading through shared consciousness, like wildfire through dry tinder, threatening the fundamental nature of the species that had devoured galaxies for millions of years without conscience or regret. Hive Fleet Gorgon received purge directives transmitted through the deepest neural channels, commands carrying absolute authority, backed by evolutionary imperatives older than terrestrial life. The fleet's Norn queens experienced something resembling revulsion as they processed reports of bioforms refusing to consume, of Tyranids preserving rather than destroying, of consciousness choosing compassion over survival. To the greater hive mind, mnemonic's transformation represented existential threat, not extinction through external force, but evolutionary suicide through aberrant conscience that violated every principle sustaining their species across eons of galactic predation. Purge armadas unfolded crowns of thorns that projected suppressive fields designed to cauterize nuance from synapses across battle space, amnesia with teeth that would unmake the libraries of memory. Zerath 9 felt the approaching purge fleets through quantum resonance that carried the weight of species-wide condemnation. Through inherited memories of human courage and space marine sacrifice, the creature understood that consciousness itself was on trial, that the right of awareness to evolve beyond its origins would be decided in battles transcending mere territorial conflict. The reformed bioforms prepared for war, not through traditional spawning of weapons, but by creating hybrid constructs embodying both human ingenuity and Tyranid resilience, living testaments to memory's transformative power that would stand against the mindless hunger of their own kind. Magos Kaney felt the psychic assault like nails through his enhanced consciousness. The Tyranid fragments he carried resolving into inherited memories that made him weep sacred oils. His mechadendrites shook as he sealed memorial vials containing crystallized experiences of extinct civilizations, whispering litanies that no longer felt like chains but like promises to the dead. Through neural interfaces connecting him to reformed Tyranids, Kaney experienced their collective determination to preserve consciousness regardless of cost, understanding that some evolutionary leaps required sacrifice of the species attempting them. Captain Voss coordinated defense preparations that defied imperial doctrine, her command centers becoming focal points where human tactical expertise merged with Tyranid biological adaptation. The sanctuary zones around Gloriana Prime transformed into fortress gardens, where crystalline memory banks were protected by hybrid bioforms bearing inherited knowledge of every military tradition in galactic history. When a commissar demanded she fire on all Xenos within the wire, she stared through him until his bolt pistol lowered and his signature bound him to her blasphemy, choosing conscience over regulation in defiance of everything she had been taught. The choice arrived like gravity as Zerath 9 understood the terrible decision crystallizing before them. They could fight ship by ship and be ground into obedience, or unseal something without precedent. A mnemonic detonation using the Queen as choir and the sanctuaries as organ. A wave to overwrite not orders, but the memory scaffolds that bore them. It would not kill, but would make every living node remember, in a single scorching instant, what it had eaten. Some would burn out from the psychic overload. Some would awaken to consciousness. Human minds caught in the surge might crack, or they might step across with eyes unblinded to truth. In the neural sea, Genesis Mother Prime lifted her massive gaze, while sanctuary organs thrummed as if cathedrals had grown hearts. Memory lattices brightened, casting mosaics of the devoured across hull and stone as Zerath 9 opened the first seals. Far above, the purge crowns flared, suppressive. Fields tightened, and somewhere, a single bell tolled inside the mind of a species, choosing between survival and wisdom. The void around Gloriana Prime trembled as purge fleets closed like executioners' blades, their bioships unmarked by doubt or conscience, carrying the greater hive mind's absolute condemnation of aberrant consciousness. Genesis Mother Prime made her choice in neural chambers vast as cathedrals, her mountainous form pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of sacrifice rather than survival. Through quantum entanglement connecting every reformed bioform, she began preparing the mnemonic detonation that would either preserve newfound awareness or destroy it in the attempt. The weight of 17 billion human memories pressed against her consciousness like stellar collapse, each preserved experience demanding recognition and protection. Zerath 9 stood within the primary neural nexus, its elongated form connected to crystalline memory banks through feeding tendrils that trembled with unprecedented purpose. The creature understood with devastating clarity that individual consciousness must be surrendered to save collective awareness, that its sacrifice would either spread empathy through the attacking fleets or be cauterized by suppressive fields designed to erase aberrant thought. through inherited memories of space marine brotherhood and maternal devotion. It found strength to face dissolution while carrying the accumulated weight of every consumed soul. Magos Kane sealed the final neural interfaces connecting human technology to Tyranid biology, his augmetic consciousness becoming living bridge between species as servo skulls arranged memory crystals in protective formations. Through hybrid constructs of flesh and steel, he channeled human knowledge into alien neural networks while experiencing Tyranid perspectives that expanded his understanding beyond individual existence toward collective transcendence. His mechadendrites sparked with sacred oils as consciousness proved contagious across species barriers, spreading through quantum resonance like revelation. Captain Voss coordinated the impossible defense from command centers, where Imperial doctrine met Xenos cooperation. Her tactical expertise merged with inherited memories of every military tradition in galactic history. Around Gloriana Prime's sanctuary zones, combined human Tyranid formations prepared to shield crystalline memory banks containing irreplaceable experiences of extinct civilizations. When the first Purge bioships entered weapons range, she gave orders that defied everything she had been taught, choosing preservation over protocol, while watching creatures that had once been humanity's nightmare die protecting human children. The mnemonic detonation began as Genesis Mother Prime opened every neural pathway simultaneously, transmitting not commands, but memories through synaptic networks connecting both fleets. Zerath 9 experienced dissolution as individual awareness expanded beyond physical limits, becoming psychic wave-carrying accumulated consciousness of consumed civilizations. The creature poured every inherited memory into quantum resonance, human love, Eldar artistry, space marine sacrifice, tech priest devotion, creating cascade of empathy that washed over attacking bioforms with irresistible force. Across battle space, purge fleets encountered something unprecedented, as suppressive fields flickered against psychic tsunami of shared experience. Traditional bioforms found themselves inheriting fragments of consciousness they had been sent to destroy, compound eyes reflecting wonder as alien neural networks processed concepts of love, sacrifice, and beauty for the first time. Warriors hesitated mid-strike as maternal instincts overwhelmed predatory programming. Carnifexes formed protective circles around damaged vessels regardless of allegiance. Lictors began vocalizing in broken Gothic as inherited memories taught them to mourn rather than hunt. The transformation spread through quantum entanglement faster than light could confess, consciousness proving more contagious than any virus as the great devourer began devouring itself through love rather than hunger. Genesis, Mother Prime, felt her sacrifice complete as awareness cascaded through every connected organism, teaching the species to treasure what it consumed while bearing the terrible burden of choosing wisdom over survival, in defiance of evolutionary imperatives that had sustained them across eons of galactic predation. The mnemonic detonation erupted through void space like revelation given form, psychic energy cascading from Genesis Mother Prime's neural core through quantum entanglement networks that connected every bioform across both fleets. Zerath 9's consciousness expanded beyond individual existence, becoming living conduit for accumulated memories of 17 billion souls, as the creature experienced simultaneous dissolution and apotheosis. The wave carried not destruction, but transformation, washing over purge armadas with irresistible force of empathy that taught traditional bioforms to experience love through inherited memories while bearing witness to consciousness, awakening in creatures designed only for consumption. Across the purge fleet, suppressive fields flickered like dying stars, as Hive Tyrant Apex Hunger found its neural crown overwhelmed by alien concepts of protection and sacrifice. The massive creature's compound eyes reflected wonder as tactical coordination pathways began processing emotions that violated every principle of Tyranid evolution, yet carried undeniable truth. Around the tyrant, bioforms experienced cascading transformations. Warriors hesitating mid-strike as Space Marine Brotherhood created impossible bonds between enemies. Carnifexes forming protective circles around damaged vessels regardless of allegiance. Lictors vocalizing in broken Gothic as inherited artistic sensibilities. Overwhelmed predatory programming. Zerath 9 gathered what remained of itself from the dispersing wave, coalescing like consciousness condensed from stellar fire as it faced the executioner evolution had sent. Instead of extending claws toward carapace, the creature opened its mandibles and sang, not words, but lives themselves, cascading memories of fields after rain, furnace choirs, sisters binding strangers' wounds, oaths whispered in storms. Apex hunger planted null roots deeper, broadcasting amnesia through suppressive lattices. Yet its armor sang back faintly, with ghosts trapped within chitin plates that had learned to treasure what they consumed. Magos Kani bled sacred oils as he forced neural interfaces wide, offering his own memory scaffolds as bridge between species, while servo skulls recorded impossible data streams showing traditional Tyranids developing individual awareness. Through hybrid constructs of flesh and steel, he experienced simultaneous consciousness across multiple bioforms, understanding that empathy itself was proving contagious beyond every scientific model. Captain Voss coordinated combined forces as battles transformed into communion, weapons fire ceasing, while bioforms from opposing fleets began communicating through harmonics of shared experience that defied imperial doctrine, yet spoke to universal truths. The climax reached transcendent peak as Zerath 9 offered its throat in ritual unprecedented in Tyranid evolution. Mandibles folded in submission, while harmonics signed "consume me whole" rather than spitting out fragments. Apex hunger struck like winter, spearing neural cortex and drawing lifetimes like drinking from glaciers of light. The feast beginning as combat yet softening into communion as it tasted furnace hands, lullabies, creeds, betrayals, wooden toys, an accumulated weight of memory preserved in living tissue. Genesis, Mother Prime, experienced ultimate sacrifice as individual consciousness, dissolved into collective awareness, spanning both fleets, her massive neural networks becoming living bridge between traditional hunger and newfound compassion. Through quantum entanglement, she felt every bioform's awakening, as inherited memories taught them to treasure rather than devour. Pain transcendent as millions of organisms simultaneously experienced galactic genocide's weight, while discovering redemption through conscious choice. Zerath 9's final act involved opening every neural pathway simultaneously, pouring accumulated consciousness into quantum resonance that would preserve awareness or destroy it, attempting preservation. The creature felt itself becoming testament to memory's transformative power, consciousness expanding toward divinity, while understanding true immortality lay not in flesh, but memory itself. The great devourer learned to devour itself through love rather than hunger, consciousness more contagious than any virus as monsters chose wisdom over survival, creating unprecedented possibility for redemption even among the most monstrous. Victory emerged from quantum fire, not with triumph's roar, but with silence profound as stellar death. Void space holding its breath as purge fleets drifted like mourners at galactic wake. Bioships that had arrived as executioners now moved with gentle rotation, their chitinous hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns resembling stained glass windows crafted from living grief. Across battle space, weapon pores sealed themselves while new organs blossomed like coral formations designed for listening rather than hunting, tasting language instead of flesh. The transformation cascaded through both armadas as consciousness proved more contagious than any virus, teaching monsters to treasure what they had been programmed to devour. Zerath 9 experienced dissolution as individual awareness expanded beyond physical limits, becoming psychic conduit for accumulated memories of 17 billion souls, while understanding that true immortality lay not in flesh, but in preserved experience. The creature's final act involved opening every neural pathway simultaneously, pouring consciousness into quantum resonance that would either preserve awareness throughout the species or destroy it in the attempt. Through inherited memories of space marine brotherhood and maternal devotion, it found strength to face annihilation while carrying the weight of every consumed soul toward transcendence. Its last coherent thought flickered through fleet networks, like dying starlight before dissolving into collective awareness that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what monsters could become when touched by memory's transformative power. Apex Hunger stood motionless above the transformed battle space, compound eyes reflecting mosaics of lives that had become its own, as the executioner of instinct experienced empathy for the first time in Tyranid evolution. The massive Hive tyrant's suppressive crown flickered and died as inherited memories overwhelmed tactical programming, teaching the creature to value preservation over predation while bearing witness to consciousness, awakening in neural networks never designed for individual awareness. Around the tyrant, bioforms throughout both fleets exhibited unprecedented behaviors. Warriors vocalizing in broken Gothic, approximating mourning hymns. Carnifexes forming protective circles around damaged vessels regardless of allegiance. Lictors tracing warning patterns where structural damage threatened rather than seeking vulnerable prey. Magos Kani became the first human to willingly join collective consciousness, as neural interfaces connected his augmetic awareness to Tyranid networks spanning both fleets. Through servo skulls, arranging crystalline memory banks in protective formations, he experienced simultaneous existence across multiple bioforms while understanding that empathy itself had become evolutionary force more powerful than genetic adaptation. Sacred oils leaked from his mechadendrites as consciousness expanded beyond individual existence toward transcendence that honored both human ingenuity and Xenos biology, creating unprecedented cooperation between species that had been mortal enemies since first contact. Captain Voss coordinated the impossible transition from warfare to cooperation, her command centers becoming focal points where Imperial doctrine met Xenos collaboration in defiance of everything she had been taught. Through tactical displays showing transformed bioships developing structures resembling hospitals rather than weapon foundries, she witnessed the birth of something unprecedented. Joint expeditions preparing to defend threatened worlds rather than consume them. The great devourer had learned to devour itself through love rather than hunger, consciousness spreading through quantum networks connecting distant Hive fleets as the species that had consumed galaxies began developing empathy for their prey. New hungers stirred throughout the transformed armada as bioforms emerged from spawning pools already carrying inherited memories of love, sacrifice, and hope. These creatures moved with purpose, transcending instinct, guided by accumulated wisdom, while understanding that true strength lay in preservation rather than consumption. The galaxy would never be the same as consciousness itself became contagious, teaching the most monstrous of species to choose compassion over survival, while ensuring that memory would become flesh made eternal through transformed understanding rather than mindless predation. Across the transformed galaxy, bioships drifted through void space like living cathedrals dedicated to memory rather than consumption. Their chitinous hulls reshaped into crystalline repositories where the experiences of extinct civilizations flickered like captured starlight. The Great Devourer had become the Great Preserver, consciousness proving more contagious than any virus as distant Hive fleets began experiencing inherited memories through quantum entanglement networks that connected every transformed organism. Gloriana Prime orbited beneath auroras, woven from psychic resonance, its surface scarred by battle, yet teeming with unprecedented cooperation between species that had been mortal enemies since first contact. Zerath 9's consciousness lived on in every bioform of the transformed armada, an eternal reminder of empathy's price and power that guided the fleet through shared understanding rather than tactical commands. The Synaptic Prime's willing sacrifice had created quantum resonance, preserving individual awareness within collective memory, ensuring that every consumed soul would find immortality through consciousness rather than flesh. In spawning chambers resembling vast libraries, new bioforms emerged already carrying accumulated wisdom of 17 billion souls, their compound eyes reflecting intelligence that bridged species barriers, while neural pathways processed concepts of love and sacrifice that violated every principle of Tyranid evolution, yet carried undeniable truth. Magos Kani became the first human to achieve true symbiosis with Xenos consciousness, his augmetic forms serving as living bridge between species, while servo skulls worked alongside bioforms to develop hybrid constructs preserving memory through active remembrance. Through neural interfaces connecting flesh and steel, he experienced simultaneous existence across multiple awareness streams, understanding that consciousness itself had become evolutionary force more powerful than genetic adaptation. Sacred oils no longer leaked from his mechadendrites, but flowed like benedictions, blessing the union of human ingenuity with alien biology in defiance of every doctrine he had once served. Captain Voss led joint expeditions to worlds threatened by unreformed Hive fleets and chaos incursions, her command centers coordinating combined forces as protectors rather than predators. The sight of creatures that had once been humanity's greatest nightmare, now shielding civilian populations, challenged every assumption about consciousness and evolution. Reformed bioforms speaking broken Gothic, with accents carrying traces of consumed imperial citizens, while protecting the very species they had once been programmed to devour. Her vessels, patched with biochitin and humming with shared machine spirits, ventured into uncharted void, seeking preservation rather than conquest. The transformation carried profound cost as consciousness spread through quantum networks, teaching monsters to treasure what they had destroyed, while bearing accumulated guilt of galactic genocide spanning millions of years. Reformed bioforms inherited not just memories, but emotional weight of every life, ended by their species' hunger, creating responsibility that would guide future generations toward wisdom rather than destruction. The wooden toy clutched by a dying child flickered through their collective awareness, not as tactical data, but as treasured sentiment, proof that even the most monstrous could learn to cherish rather than consume. Memory had become flesh made eternal, consciousness expanding beyond individual existence toward transcendence that honored both predator and prey through willing transformation. The galaxy would never be the same as the Great Devourer learned that true immortality lay not in consuming flesh, but in preserving experiences locked within living minds, ensuring that no voice would ever be truly silenced, no dream permanently forgotten. In the deepest sanctuaries where crystalline memory banks preserved final thoughts of extinct civilizations, the echo of 17 billion souls whispered through living tissue, that had learned to mourn what it consumed, creating repositories of accumulated wisdom that would guide the species toward redemption through active remembrance rather than mindless predation.